All right, welcome to the rule number 7 video. Rule number 7 is also in the steering and sailing rules section. Rule number 7 focuses on the risk of collision. So get your notepad ready and let's jump in. Rule 7A states that every vessel shall use all available means appropriate to the prevailing circumstances and conditions to determine if a risk of collision exists. If there is any doubt, such risk shall be deemed to exist. So what this rule is saying is that all vessels must use all appropriate means. So this means the use of your lookout, which we just talked about in a previous rule, along with the use of your radar and your electronics to determine vessels and potential hazards that you might not be able to see with the naked eye. This also includes the use of your compass to identify if approaching vessels have a constant bearing to your vessel. This would indicate to you that that vessel has not altered their course to avoid a collision with your vessel. And when this is occurring, they are continuing to navigate directly towards you. Along with the use of your electronics, you're also going to use the lookout that we spoke about earlier, their vision and their hearing, to be able to identify if there's a potential risk. And lastly, very important, this rule states that if there's ever any doubt that a risk of collision exists, then you must deem that there is a risk of collision. Now, this is very important for you to remember because you don't want any hesitation at all in making a decision. So always remember, if there's any doubt, there is a risk of collision. And when there's a risk of collision, actions need to be taken to prevent that risk of collision. Rule 7b states that proper use shall be made of radar equipment if fitted and operational, including long-range scanning to obtain early warning of risk of collision and radar plotting or equivalent systematic observation of detected objects. So what this is saying is just what we talked about in the previous rule. If you have a radar and it's operational on your vessel, you must be using it to determine early signs of collision. Ensure that the range of the radar scans are set to an adequate range. This will ensure that you have proper time to make the necessary adjustments. What it's trying to say is that you don't want to have your range too small and you don't see a potential hazard until it's too late. Rule 7c states that assumptions shall not be made on the basis of scanty information, especially scanty radar information. So this one is really simple. If you have scanty information, which simply means poor information from a radar scan, do not make any assumptions on the speed and the course of the other vessel. Not having all the proper information could lead to you making a wrong decision. I can tell you from personal experience, there's been many times that I'm looking and monitoring on my radar screen, and on a scan I'll see a mark, and on the next scan I won't see it there again. And then on the third or fourth scan, I'll see that mark pop up again. Now, this could be a potential hazard, so you have to make note of it, especially if it's in the path that your vessel is traveling in. But at the end of the day, one very important thing that I want you to know, if you're ever in doubt, what should you do? That's correct. You immediately take appropriate action as if the risk of collision exists. Rule 7d item 1 states, in determining if risk of collision exists, the following considerations shall be among those taken into account. Such risk shall be deemed to exist if the compass bearing of an approaching vessel does not appreciably change. So what this is saying is that if you have an approaching vessel and the compass bearing of that approaching vessel is not changing, then a risk of collision exists. What you should see that approaching vessel do is make a large course change, which will result in a compass change, a large compass change, to let you know that they have identified that the risk of collision exists and they've taken appropriate action. Rule 7d item 2 states, in determining if risk of collision exists, the following considerations shall be among those taken into account. Such risk may sometimes exist even when an appreciable bearing change is evident, particularly when approaching a very large vessel or a tow, or when approaching a vessel at close range. So what this is saying is that sometimes, even with an appreciable bearing change, you could still have a risk of collision. Because that ship that you're approaching could be a very large ship, or you could be approaching a tug with a tow that creates a very long distance, including their tow cable. In these cases, an even larger bearing change will need to be created to avoid that potential hazard. This will allow you to steer clear of the larger vessel or the vessel with the tow. Alright, congratulations on completing rule number 7. Hopefully by now you're noticing that all of these rules are beginning to tie together, and that hopefully you're having much more clarity on the rules. Study these notes, and I will see you in the next video.